Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, A Cloud Disaster Recovery, a Survival Guide by the University of Canberra. Brought to you today by Commvault in partnership with Amazon Web Services, and we have our very special guest, the University of Canberra. So your presenters today are myself, Chris Gondek. I work with the Solutions and Product Marketing team for Commvault, specialising specifically in cloud and virtualisation. And we're very lucky to have with us Justin Mason, who's the Associate Director, Vendor and Operations from the University of Canberra. And welcome, Justin. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for the intro, Chris. Yeah, so as you said, Justin Mason. I'm currently Associate Director of Vendor and Operations. I've been with the university for about 20 years, so a bit of a long stint. A lot of my previous roles have been around systems administration, and I've worked with Commvault here for about 10 years. So seen the platform change and grow over a number of years. My main role at the moment is I oversee the vendor and operations team, and my role broadly consists of two parts. We specifically manage vendor relationships and governance, and also the direction and management of the strategic and technical aspects of future university technologies and architecture. But yeah, that's kind of a bit about me.
Fantastic. And you say 20 years with the university. You've probably seen some changes and evolution in infrastructure and technologies over that time.
Yeah, definitely. So when I kind of started in my main system admin roles, everything was kind of like your three-tier architecture with server and storage. And my main evolution is I kind of bought in and adopted a hyper-converged platform in Nutanix. And we didn't know at the time because we just built another large data center, but just after we built that large data center and started to adopt Nutanix, our infrastructure started to dramatically reduce. And over the last, I think it's been about 4 or 5 years with Nutanix, we've reduced our infrastructure footprint by about 80%. So it's been, obviously massive positives there in terms of financial savings and environmental savings, etc. But obviously Commvault being a critical step to that journey as well with the integration with Nutanix that it offers us.
Fantastic. And so as the infrastructure evolved, at some point I suspect that cloud started to make a big impact.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to about 2013, when we started to have a large push to really look at what was out there in the cloud and what we could do better and cheaper and maybe make us a bit more agile, and really started to look at the cloud players like Azure and AWS, and that's when I started to first come across Commvault's integration with AWS, and I started to think, well, why can't we do something like that here? And starting to look into it, and not only looking at the cost aspects, but also I guess more about the ease of use and the management and having true offsite DR kind of backups, which we didn't really have at the time. And that was kind of, we'd played around with a little bit of, in the cloud at that point, but that was our first real serious look at it.
Fantastic. That actually is a really good lead into our next talking point. So talking about the infrastructure evolution over that time in adopting new technologies, this is obviously being driven by the business and being driven by your strategic IT initiatives, but ultimately it's to deliver this concept of digital transformation and things like improving the customer experience. You've got a large number of students, which we'll go into at some point, but obviously technology played a role in that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when we're speaking about customer experience, and one of our main digital strategy pillars at the moment is kind of reduce friction for the users. And obviously when we talk about what Commvault does for us in terms of protecting all of our services and our data and to give that customers the peace of mind that we can get their data and services back up and running if we need to, then yeah, that goes hand in hand.
Fantastic. And there's a couple of other areas around the power of digital transformation that we speak a lot about at Commvault. Product innovation and competitive differentiation. Obviously, you're not the only uni in town, and you're looking to offer the best service to your customers, and having that kind of resilient infrastructure with cloud adoption and peace of mind with the secondary storage and disaster recovery capabilities must help in those areas.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, everything about universities these days is reputation, so you want to make sure that you have systems in place to make sure that your university's reputation is of a high standard, because you don't want I mean, when you're recruiting either staff or attracting students, you don't want them to hear horror stories about the university in terms of protecting their data or so forth.
Fantastic. And look, from a strategic IT perspective, financial protection and recovery readiness. This is around the costs associated with technology investments and risks associated with growing infrastructure, growing cyber threat activity, and the costs and technology needs that satisfy those.
Yeah, exactly. And when we talk about financial protection, and obviously and mitigating risk, one of the main focuses of which we'll go into, I guess, later, is by integrating with AWS and having true backups in the cloud that are located some physical distance away from the university means everything in terms of that risk mitigation.
Fantastic. So while we're talking about the business initiatives and the business drivers that lead businesses towards making these investments in these new technologies, infrastructures like cloud, we have a very interesting statistic here. Around 67% of surveyed IT leaders say that disaster recovery is the cloud project most impactful to their business. Tell us a little bit about that. How does disaster recovery rank in your level of importance when you're making these strategic IT decisions?
Oh yeah, definitely. Nearly every IT decision that you make in terms of new systems coming online, and you're always looking in terms of that disaster recovery aspect. But I have to say, yeah, I used to worry about it a lot more, but sleep a lot better at night knowing that I've got that Commvault and AWS integration, because I always, when we didn't have kind of the agility we got now, I'd always be kind of paranoid about, what happens if there's a major disaster at the university, we lose a data center, all our tapes are here, all our backups are on site. The first question is going to be asked, well, why didn't we have more up-to-date recent backups readily available at an external location?
And the responsibility ultimately.
Exactly, and the responsibility for that. And I mean, if you've got the responsibility for that, it's a nice challenge to be able to, I guess, implement such a, elegant solution for it.
Fantastic. So while we are on the topic of responsibility and who's responsible for when things happen, and we're very, very clear on that at Commvault, it's a when things happen, not if things happen. You really need to be prepared. We have a lot of focus around recovery readiness with Commvault. But I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about what cloud vendors call the shared responsibility model. And here on the screen you see 3 different approaches. We'll start with the native cloud approach. Cloud vendors, including AWS, our alliance partner, has a lot of native tool sets, things like life cycling and S3 buckets, things like EC2 and EBS snapshots, things like that. These are very specific to AWS and server purpose and provide some capabilities. But you can see that there's a couple of gaps there. On another level, from the marketplace, you may be able to deploy point product and specific tools that work specifically with some cloud datasets. But again, there are some gaps there. And this shared responsibility model is openly published. There's a statement that the cloud won't do your mess for less. The cloud has been created to absolutely provide the most efficient public infrastructure as a service capability. From a Commvault perspective, when we talk about complete backup and recovery, we're helping our customers maintain their hybrid IT environments. Not all workloads shift to the cloud immediately or overnight. Most of our customers run in a hybrid state, and where we kind of take that data center experience that our customers have had for many years and extend it out to the cloud is through that single platform capability and that user experience. So native cloud integration, we will absolutely use the same capabilities in the cloud. We will drive EBS snapshots as a best practice using our Commvault IntelliSnap capability. We will write out natively to cloud storage like S3. We will automatically discover EC2 instances, Amazon RDS instances, and provide protection and recovery mechanisms for those. All of that comes back to business level and strategic IT initiatives like cost control, like having that single visibility in your hybrid IT environment and the same experience in the cloud as you would have on premises ongoing. So I'm sure a lot of you on the webinar have been through a similar experience of infrastructure evolution and cloud adoption, and you're starting to learn about how disaster recovery plays a big role in that and the different challenges with the shared responsibility model. But Justin, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about your environment and about the University of Canberra. What can you tell us?
Yeah, no worries. So there's a few stats there up on the slide, which you can see. But I guess to expand on that, the university is relatively young, being only 30 years old, but is Australia's fastest rising university in terms of world rankings. One of our main focus here is work integrated learning, having one of the largest integrated learning programs in Australia for our students. And there's been a major push the last few years to get ourselves back on the stage, world stage, I should say, in terms of research. And because of that, we also meet or exceed the world standard in research across 28 different disciplines.
Wow, 28 disciplines. And so, 14,000 students, 1,000 staff, that's effectively 15,000 IT users in your IT environment.
Yeah, there's obviously a big user base, a very varied user base, and because we're catering for professional staff, academic staff, researchers, students, obviously, our IT systems are very varied as well.
It's quite a dynamic environment I see there.
Yeah, so 90 terabytes plus of data, which is growing obviously each month. As I said before, we've heavily virtualized onto the Nutanix Hyperconverged platform, and we've got over a couple of hundred that's a couple of hundred VMs that we protect with Commvault. We've got another couple of hundred VMs on top of that for test and dev purposes and so forth. And I guess I should say too, a lot of our data growth has been in the research area, so that's really spiked in the last couple of years. But the good thing about that is we've had no issues with Commvault scaling to meet that need as well, because obviously research data is one of the most important things we have to back up
for a university. I can imagine, yeah.
And in terms of being a university, just a dynamic range of IT systems such as Oracle RAC clusters. We've got student management systems, we've got staff payroll system, we've got financial management systems.
And these would all fall under the mission critical category, I'm imagining, right?
Exactly.
If staff aren't getting paid and students' activity isn't being recorded, then what's the university doing? Right?
Yeah, exactly. and they're one of the systems that might be HA by default, but for some systems, for whatever architectural reason, can't be HA, then obviously you're going to rely on Commvault to be your disaster recovery.
Provide some recoverability there.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So, Justin, with an environment as big and as distributed and complex and as busy as yours, naturally, like a lot of our other customers out there, you probably experienced some growing pains and some challenges appeared as you were going through this infrastructure evolution journey. Tell us a little bit about those challenges, or what kind of things were you facing?
Yeah, I guess back a few years ago, 2013, 2014, every so often the risk conversations would occur and the questions would be asked, how protected is our data, and in terms of if an on-site kind of disaster happened, what options do we have in terms of our off-site backups?
Interesting. Was there anything that was happening in the world around that time in the industry? Was maybe some big ransomware attacks in the news or anything like that?
Nothing that I can remember specifically. I guess it was because at that time we were trying to make sure that we had well-documented DR plans and also our business continuity plans.
Yeah.
And when you're going through things like that and you're getting questions about, well, how well protected is our data, how quickly can we recover from a disaster, and I kept coming back to, well, there has to be a more agile or a better solution for our off-site backups. At the time, we were using a records company, so that's someone that primarily specialise in like taking paper records off-site. But what we were using them for is to take a copy of our full data set, and take that off-site and store it for us, which I guess
that poses its own challenges, doesn't it? Cost and time to recovery.
Yeah,
like that.
And what we were finding is it would take us about a week to write a full data set to tape, because back in those days, LTO4 or something, or LTO5 we had. So there was a length to make the time to make the backup, and then there was waiting for the records company to come and pick it up. And then if we ever had to go back to those tapes, we'd have to request them to drop a tape off, which might take a couple of days. And because of the time involved to do those backups, to take them off-site, the cost involved, we were only doing them quarterly. So we did have a copy of a data off-site. The risk there was how up-to-date was that data.
So a number of challenges around cost, around risk, obviously around the performance that you're experiencing at the time with that technology investment, and all ultimately results in your customers, the student experience, right? If there was a recovery request that took all that time to retrieve a tape from off-site, was really impacting the student experience at the end.
Oh, exactly, impacting the whole user base experience. If we, for some reason, had to go to one of those tapes that were in storage, and if something was urgent, oh, sorry, can you wait a couple of days while we get it back? Yeah, so, and with everything that is based on the customer experience these days, and me personally as well, you want to make sure that they have a good experience.
Good experience through service levels, absolutely. So, Justin, given that you were facing these challenges as your infrastructure was growing, and there's more focus from the business around improving these activities around disaster recovery and recovery experience, tell us a bit about what did you do next?
Yeah, okay. I guess I should just preference by saying, so our journey with Commvault and AWS has been ongoing for a few years now, where we kind of started off with DR and then we moved to long-term retention as well, which I'll expand on later. But over those years, and obviously always keeping my eye on what's out there, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to put products and systems in place that not only
do what's best for the university,
and what's the most cost effective. So over the years, I've always kept an eye on other backup vendors out there, such as Veeam and Rubrik and now HiQ, the new player on the scene, and great products in their own right. But what we found that over the years, each time we'd go back and look at these vendors, while they might meet the needs of some customers, none of them on their own met all of our requirements that we needed at the time. So when it came to out of the box, just simple integration with AWS, dedupe in the cloud, all those kind of things, Commvault was able to continue to, I guess, keep pace with putting all those features in that we needed.
Fantastic.
And also, and cost as well.
Yeah. So you did your due diligence, so to speak.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
You talked about evaluating various different products and found the kind of end-to-end. I really like your comment here about there was no gaps to fill. So that's what kind of end-to-end means, I guess, is that single platform approach.
Yeah, because sometimes we talk to various other vendors and they say, oh yes, we can do that, you just need this other third-party product as well. But to us, I guess, having a small IT team, we want an end-to-end solution so we don't have to support other products, I guess.
Yep. And that keeps costs down, that keeps risks down, and
exactly.
Obviously full administrative engineering time down as well, which is a major cost.
And you don't want to have to stay on a platform just because what you know. But when you find that the platform has everything you need and keeps putting in other features you might need over time, obviously not having to change platforms makes it a lot easier for your ongoing IT support as well. You don't have to retrain staff. You don't have to learn a new system. You don't have to worry about, oh, how am I going to take my backups from an old system to a new system. So yeah, it worked
You've got
out
that
well.
continuity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic. So Justin, you evaluated a number of different products, and you came to the conclusion that the Commvault and AWS combination was right fit for purpose for you guys. And can you tell us a little bit more about the solution itself and what benefits it brought you?
Yeah. So back in, as I said, 2013, 2014, we were looking for that, I guess, more robust, agile solution for our DR backups. And when I started to look at, how can we do this better? And then starting to read up on the integration with cloud that Commvault had, and then started to reach out to our local Commvault rep. And he was, as always, really, really supportive. We also had some good AWS reps here locally as well. And the best thing that happened, and I encourage everyone else to do, is we just got them in the same room. So here we are trying to integrate Commvault with AWS. Well, who's the best people to talk to?
Get the vendors in there together. There's an alliance partnership, best of breed, obviously.
Yeah, and back then it was a little bit new for them as well, but having them in the same room to bounce ideas and questions off each other. I think once we started conversations, a couple of weeks later, we had some test data going up into AWS here in Sydney, which is 300 odd kilometres away from us here in Canberra.
And I think you have a claim to fame here that you're one of the first Commvault customers to write directly to an S3 bucket for the Commvault product. Yeah,
I didn't realise at the time, but I think we were pretty early adopters. But I guess the good thing for us was that the integration was already there with Commvault. We had good vendors here locally to talk to. Being a university, we actually had a really good connection to the AWS data centre in Sydney, which made things a lot easier for us as well. And once we started to, I guess, kick the tires of it and have a little play around with it, and saw that it was not only going to work, but to my surprise, I think when we first started using it, I was surprised initially at how fast it was. I thought, oh, we're on a good link, it's going to be pretty good, but pretty good was an understatement. It was phenomenal, the speeds.
I think that's a combination of the link speed as well as some deduplication technology.
Oh, definitely. So we didn't use dedupe initially, which I guess at the time wasn't a major problem because the link speed was so good. But later on, when we transitioned to obviously our long-term, not obviously, sorry, the better way to say it, later on, so in 2017, our solution with Commvault AWS for DR was working so well. And then I started to think, we were coming up for some infrastructure replacements for our tape library. So I started scratching my head thinking, surely there's a better way to do this as well. Like, why in this day and age with all these cloud providers, such cheap storage in the cloud, dynamically expand, you don't ever have to worry about it. Why are we still backing up to tape? And then
you wanted to leverage what cloud had to offer for another business reason.
For another business reason, yeah. So looking at how much it was going to cost to replace our on-site tape libraries, and then also looking yet again how far Commvault had come with the AWS integration in terms of supporting deduplication in the cloud, how more cost-effective it was now that we could also write our data to S3 and then use retention to take it off to Glacier after a certain period of time to save even more money.
And there's that direct native integration with Glacier as well, which is a real differentiator for us we've seen in the market.
Exactly. So, sorry, and I was going to say originally that our original DR solution with Commvault and AWS took about 4 weeks. So we thought at the time, this was really quick to get up and running. When we actually went to do the solution for our long-term retention to replace tape, it took a few days. So I think because we already were using it, it was already integrated. We had some Commvault to come in to help us for a couple of days.
So time to adoption and time to deploy the new approach for the long-term retention, you had projected about a 4-week project time, and
at least because we kind of thought, we were kind of using it for DR, but then we're doing something a bit different because we were changing by we were going to use dedupe in the cloud, so tweaking a little few things here and there, but it was just so quick and easy to get up and running.
And ended up getting up and running in a couple of days, so saving you a lot of time and effort. Exactly what it was going to take.
Yeah,
fantastic. So Justin, evaluated different solutions, went with a Commvault and AWS solution, managed to deploy it in less time than you expected to, and reaped a lot of the benefits from the technology. Ultimately, what does this all mean for the business in terms of value back to the business?
Well, there's obviously, which is up on the slide there, the cost savings, but I think the value that's hard to measure is just the freeing up the resources here to focus on other things. And to be honest, a few years ago, we used to, like the IT team collectively, we're only a small IT team, so obviously the time we've got to spend on things is limited, time is limited, but we did used to spend a lot of time managing the Commvault platform, and it's no exaggeration to say now that it's almost like set and forget. I think by moving something to AWS, which obviously the storage is dynamic, and no matter how much you throw, it just keeps growing and growing. You don't have to worry about adding more storage, buying more tapes, changing tapes.
And have to predict volume capacity for the future and things.
Exactly. Like and being honest, we hardly ever. We have our reports that email us each day, so we kind of know what's going on in the backup system. But how often we actually need to go in there to do anything or check it's all running properly is definitely not very often these days.
And I love the statement that you said at the beginning, the measurable value. How do you measure the time? You say you're a small team, didn't have to grow while your environment was growing, while your data was growing. The solution kept delivering on the business needs without having to throw more admin time. In fact, you saved admin time.
Exactly.
And as well as the costs. So let's look at a few of those in a bit more detail and see how this could potentially help our other customers and prospects out there. So Justin, you've shared with us at a high level some cost and time-saving results, but if we dig a little deeper, you mentioned a direct cost savings around tape.
Yeah, so that's based over a few years, but costs with not having to use the off-site records company anymore, not having to replace tape infrastructure, not having to buy new tapes, all that kind of stuff might add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, but obviously to be realistic there, we've taken out the cost of cloud as well. We've measured the cost of cloud.
And these are direct measurable costs.
Yes.
There's obviously the non-tangible costs that are associated, like the risk and the time involved and the effort, not just the actual invoices in this sort of thing.
Exactly, yeah, and that's stuff that's always hard to measure, but just the savings in resources to support this kind of thing, and staff being able to focus on what I guess the university would, or IT as a whole would deem more important, like our digital strategy and the student experience and research and so forth.
So things like having 6 times faster backups might help in that. Right?
So what I was saying before, which blew me away, was the speeds that we're seeing with using AWS. Like we're peaks out at something like 3,000 gig an hour, which was faster than I could ever imagine, but I'm assuming dwarfs any LTO tape speeds. So that obviously straight away saw a large increase in the amount of data we could back up in any given time. And when we're talking about, it used to take us a week to do our manual tape copies to send off to
for disaster
recovery.
So
now we're talking like 24 hours or something to copy a full data set up to AWS.
Fantastic. So like that middle point there, you enabled daily off-site disaster recovery of these massive data sets.
Yeah, so
previously, you could only do once a quarter.
Yeah, exactly. So back in the day when we first started using the AWS Commvault integration for DR, we were basically, every time a new full would complete, that would get sent up to AWS, and so that was just a massive improvement in terms of how agile we were being. And then to now transition that to our long-term retention backups to replace tape, it's similar. Like those backups are now writing as quicker than our old tape backups would, and not only are they completing quicker, but the advantage is they're obviously located off-site for risk mitigation purposes, I guess.
So completing quicker, this 38% improvement in backup window. That obviously, on the surface, might mean, yes, my backups are completing quicker. What that means is that you've now got an extended backup window, which means you're future-proof for growth. You can throw more data at this environment, and not have to grow it as it is.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you remind me of that, because back in the days when we used to sometimes see we'd bring on a large data set, and all of a sudden now we'd run out of storage, or our Commvault environment might struggle then to maintain the SLAs on backup windows. But I have to say, in the last few years, our current Commvault infrastructure, and now that we've got AWS and Dedupe in the cloud,
and it's the scalability and the elasticity that comes with it.
And we've been throwing on more and more workloads, and especially with the research data, and we actually haven't had to change anything. It's just handled the load. And that's, like I said, that's just one less kind of overhead taken off the teams.
It's really nice for you to share these positive results from your investment in Commvault and AWS, and all of that ultimately comes back to improved customer experience, which are your students here, and maintaining those service levels, and obviously meeting the needs, balancing the needs of the business and of your customers through these availability and reliability of the digital services.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah.
So that brings us to the end of our webinar today. I'd like to thank you so much, Justin, for taking the time to tell and share your story with us, and everyone on the webinar. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of useful information that our folks will take away.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Fantastic. And for more information on how you can leverage Commvault and AWS services, check out commvault.com/AWS. You'll also see in the resources widgets a link to the customer testimonial or the customer reference that the University of Canberra has shared with Commvault. That's publicly available. If you'd like to learn more, please reach out. But with that, we'd like to thank you for your time and see you on the next webinar.
So naturally, in the excitement and heat of things, I've kind of wrapped up the webinar before actually talking about the question and answers that we've had. And we've got Justin here with us. Justin, welcome, and thanks for joining us on the webinar.
Yeah, not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Look, we've had a couple of questions. One of the questions that's come through is that you've been using this combination of Commvault and AWS cloud storage for some time now for your backups and your long-term retention and disaster recovery. How much data do you think you've actually consumed in the cloud?
Since we, I guess, originally started using it back in 2013, it's probably been in the region of petabytes in terms of data that we've moved up into the cloud. But having said that, that's not how much we're storing there. So when we first started using it for our DR backups, we were sending up full copies of our backups, and then we were deleting the old copies as we sent up new copies, because we were just using it for DR purposes. So week in and week out, we would be sending up 100 terabytes, delete 100 terabytes. But then as we moved on to using this solution for long-term retention, that's when we switched to using Dedupe in the cloud to make sure that it was going to be more cost-effective. So at the moment, what's in the cloud would be maybe a couple of 100 terabytes, and that's the advantage of using Dedupe, because even though we're constantly sending all our data up there for long-term retention, it's only sending up the change data.
Fantastic. And I know, having worked with Amazon Web Services for some time now, they actually have their technical account managers and specialists actively out working with their customers on ways to reduce their AWS consumption bill. This kind of almost seems to go against the principle of a profitable business, but this is absolutely one of those ways, right? I mean, leveraging a deduplication technology is not just speeding up the backup and disaster recovery process. You're actually consuming less cloud storage and thus paying less for your cloud storage.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So I guess there's two ways to look at it. I mean, Commvault continue to kind of put in additional features to, like, Dedupe, to make sure that you're only using the storage you need to do. But then AWS, I think when we first started to look at using it for DR, and it was kind of coming out pretty much cost effective to use it for DR instead of on-premise storage, which wasn't giving you off-site DR, but it was still going to give us some form of DR. And then a couple of weeks later, after we started looking at it, AWS did a price cut, and then it was just a no-brainer. And over the years, you continually see that with all the cloud providers, not just AWS. They'll bring out new storage tiers. They'll continually cut the costs. So the good thing is, even though you've gone to this solution, you can pretty much, or hopefully you can guarantee that over the years it'll become more and more cost-effective, just with the nature of how these cloud providers move.
That's actually a really interesting point you just raised. One of the other questions is, what type of AWS storage does Commvault support, and what do you use? From our perspective, as soon as a S3 storage tier comes out, like infrequent access as an example, or even deep Glacier archive and things like Vault Lock, Commvault's one of the first vendors to market to support these native storage capabilities. Have you had a play with any of the other storage tiers available?
Yeah, so when we first started using it for DR, we pretty much, I think, it was S3 infrequent access. So either we're using the S3 infrequent access pretty early on, because that was a storage tier that came out pretty quickly after we started using the integration, and straight away it offered further cost savings, and the only downside I think was it may have had less geo replication, which I guess because we were using it for DR backups at the time wasn't a complete showstopper. And then when we started looking at it, or started using it for, and planning to use it for long-term retention, we had a look at the Glacier storage tiers, and what made sense for us for further cost savings was to send up our data to S3 IA infrequent access in the first instance, and then after 12 months age it off for either into Glacier for either further cost savings. Having said that, we've our local Commvault rep is fantastic. We've been working him as well, and he's been helping us to do some further cost modelling on how we maybe even are able to improve things even more.
Fantastic. We've got another question from the audience here. Justin, do you do daily or weekly copies to AWS S3 and then 3 monthly to Glacier? Or how does that work?
Do you weekly copies to AWS 3 and then 3 monthly? No, pretty much. We do our weekly fulls go to AWS 3, and then we actually do 12 monthly to Glacier. And aging it in Glacier, we just use the actually retention options in AWS. So that takes care. So on the bucket, we just set what the retention policy is and when we want it to age off. And then when we need to recall it, if there's data that's located on Glacier, the workflow procedure is actually built into Commvault, and it'll go and make the call to Glacier because there's a bit of a wait for it to actually call the data back. But because we're only sending that data off at 12 months or older, there's not really many situations where we need to go back to Glacier, because I'm assuming a lot of other organisations would be similar. Most of the time when you're restoring data, it would be within like a few weeks or months of someone that's lost the data. Yeah.
Yeah, and Glacier is that tier, right? It's a very cost-effective tier for long-term retention, highly unlikely to restore from, and that's where you get the kind of egress hit. But at the same time, the ongoing cost and maintenance of such a low-cost, long retention tier of storage, the benefits really outweigh the challenges as regards to a tape equivalent, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. We've got one more question here, one more time for question, and it is, do you make read-only copies? This customer has a concern if someone has access to the copy and deletes it. It's an interesting question. So this, I think, might be alluding to the Vault Lock capability of Glacier. Have you considered using that?
Oh, okay. No. I'm just trying to read that in the context of security, I suppose. I guess there's the only concern of someone getting access to and deleting it, I think, would be if maybe there was a misconfiguration that happened on your AWS account. Because in terms of, I mean, all the data from the university to AWS is sent encrypted. So in transit, it's safe, and in rest, there's only Commvault's obviously connecting to it via using the AWS security keys and stuff like that. So I wouldn't. Management. Yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't think that there'd be much of a concern there of losing data or someone deleting it unless there was like a human error of giving someone that access.
Yeah, and that's Amazon's number one priority, first and foremost, that they keep telling us, or Amazon Web Services rather, has told us that security is absolutely their number one priority. And so there's obviously a number of mechanisms. And from a Commvault perspective, hence why we support all these different storage tiers, we absolutely encourage best practices as you've adopted to use S3 and infrequent access buckets for your short-term retention data. But moving out to Glacier for long-term retention, you've got multiple tiers and multiple recovery points. So with that, I'd like to thank you so much, Justin, for coming out and talking to us about your experience leveraging Commvault at Amazon Web Services for a number of your IT and business needs around disaster recovery and cost savings from tape replacement. For everyone else that's on the call, please feel free to reach out. You've got mine and Justin's details, and check out the University of Canberra's public reference on more information on how they leveraged Commvault and Amazon Web Services. We will stick around a little bit on the Q&A widget, but with that, I'll end the webcast and see you all on the next webcast. Thanks again, Justin.
No worries. Thank you.